Well, thank you very much for your introduction. And also I'd like to thank Adele and Simon and the Newton Institute for this opportunity. I've been here for a week and it has been great, and I'm learning a lot about different packing problems. So what I'm going to do today is talk about yet another packing problem, and that's a packing problem from another angle, which is from block copolymers. Before I start, I'd like to thank my collaborators, and these are a group of students from McMaster University. It has been very fun to work with them. And also I have collaborations with a bunch of theorists, including some applied mathematicians, which I turn to when I have problems I can't solve. And also I talk a lot with experimenters like Frank-Kasper and An-Chang when they to learn about what been observed experimentally. Now, for those who are not all right, good. So for those who are not familiar with what block copolymers are, it's actually, I'm a theorist and I'm a physicist, so I don't really know the chemistry as much, but my view of block copolymers is very simple. It's just a line like a one-dimensional object, and you connect them together. And as you think about that, there's really unlimited way to do that. So what that means is there's lots of varieties of block copolymers like shown here. Now, one unique thing about block copolymer is that because they're composed of different ingredients together, so they are intrinsically frustrated. And what that means is that there's opposite interaction in the system to drive the system to be frustrated. So they need to be to do certain compromise to find the optimal position. Now, the frustrations can be at the molecular level, and also can be at the packing level of the domains, and also can be imposed by external fields. For example, if you put block copolymers into small compartments, that will introduce extra frustration. Now, in terms of molecular level frustration, it's actually very straightforward. The idea is that if you have a copolymer chain, which is has say red and blue parts, and in general they don't like each other, there's a repulsive interaction, and if there's no link between them, what you have is that you have what we call polymer blends. So they're just phase separate. You just have two phases, just like oil and water, very simple, but they're linked. So at the most they can do is what's shown here. So they locally separate, but they're still connected. And then if you have one chain, it's like this. But if you have lots of them, what they do is they form domains. And the domains they can form is, again, very simple, because it's just depend on dimensionality. So you can have layers, you can have cylinders, you can have spheres. So those are the domains formed due to this fluctuation. Now, when you have all these domains, then you can have different states. For example, if these block copolymers are in solution, then what you have is different type of micelles and membranes, etc. That's not what I'm going to be talking about today. What I'm going to talk about more today is that if you have what we call a melt, which are just polymers themselves, or dense solution, then these domains are going to pack together, and they're going to form long-range ordered phases. And this is the packing problem I am interested in and I'm going to focus on. Now, then with this, actually this is a picture I stole from Greg. So with this, then there's another set of frustration comes in, which is the packing frustration. That's actually really related to the problem we are talking about in this program. And the idea here is that if you have a copolymer they self-assemble to form spherical micelles. Now, if you have lots of these spherical micelles, they are going to pack to form a crystalline structure. But of course, what that does is it breaks the rotational symmetry from one micelle point of view. Now you have a lattice. And the polymer will need to stretch out to fill the space, or in another word, the packing density is always 1. You always fill the space. Polymers don't like to have voids. And what that means is that now these spheres need to be stretched. And then you can have two scenarios. One is that you're going to stretch away such that the micelles will be deformed to assume a shape which is different from sphere. And of course, they don't like it because that's not the natural state. That's going to cost you energy. But on the other hand, the filling the space require that. And that's another level of frustration, which what that frustration leads to is that it leads to the formation of different faces. So, or in other words, if I have spheres packing, you have the faces up there. And if I have, say, cylinders and layers packing, then you have all other type of interesting faces appear. Yes?
Because the legend is very small, but when I got into the business of minimal surfaces about 40 years ago, there was a gyroid. Is that the face there?
Yeah, that's the gyroid. That's a double gyroid. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? So maybe. All right. Okay. Now, the way then is that how do we understand this? And that's actually a question we've been talking about in this program quite a bit, which is, for example, in the packing of hard spheres, we always say we're going to maximize the packing density. And then the question is, what is the driving force for the packing or what are the things we need to optimize? And the idea here is that for the Prof copolymer system or for any of these molecular systems is intrinsically a thermodynamic system. So what we need to do here is minimize the free energy of, and in terms of doing that, the question now is that the system is very complex. So there's lots of local minima. So then the question is which local minima wins? And that's how we determine the phase diagram. Now, in order to do that, then what we need to have an accurate free energy density, which has all these phases. And then we also need efficient method to find these minima. Then we can compare the minima and decide which one is better. Now, for the case of polymeric system, that's in my view, a wonderful system, which is very flexible in terms of the molecular model and in terms of theoretical formulation, which is the so-called self-consistent field theory. And what it is very simple, is that you have a many body system where everybody interacts with anything else, and that's very complicated to solve. And what you can do is mathematically, you can transform the same problem from the many body problem to one molecular problem in the field. Now, if you allow this field to fluctuate, your theory is accurate. There's no approximation. And the approximation comes in, which you say is that if you minimize the with respect to the field, then you get your mean field approximation. And the problem now becomes a single molecular in the mean field. And you can solve this problem analytically or numerically. And once you have that solution, you can then ask the question, does my solution produce another field? Does it match? If it doesn't match, you just do the loop and you can find the solution. And once you have the solution, then you can calculate the free energy. And so that's the framework we use. Now, another issue of this framework is that because it's a complex problem, the theory itself is actually a highly nonlinear and non-local theory. So there are many local minima. So numerically, if you want to find, I mean, this is of course a typical optimization problem. There's many possible solutions, and which solution depends on initial condition. So what we do is we do two things. One is that if we want to discover new phases, then we just design all sorts of different initial conditions and see what we get. And on the other hand, if we want to construct phase diagram and to do detailed comparison, then we can use designed initial condition to find the solution correspond to the structure we want. We do both. And the idea is that you can use, and after 30, 40 years or so development, currently we do have efficient numerical method to solve this type of problem and find these different solutions. Now, this is one example of what we do in terms of doing the phase diagram. Don't worry about what the system are. The system is basically really is just we have a polymer, and they can self-assemble into spherical packing phases. And we have different spherical packing phases. And the idea here is that we can find the solution for correspond to each of these. And for each solution, we have the free energy. And the idea now is that if we plot the free energy as a function of certain parameter, then we have a curve like this. And what from this curve, then you can read off minimum, minimum, minimum. So now it's a phase transition from the blue to red to black. And that turns out to be the sodium chloride structure to sodium chloride structure to zinc sulfide structure. So that's how we find these phases. Now with this, then, if we go back to the simplest case, which is any AB die block, so just A and B. And if we do this calculation, this is the phase diagram we end up. And what it has is it has the laminar layered phase when the two blocks are more or less the same. And then if you change one block to small, it will go through the cylinders and spheres. And between cylinder and the layered structure, you have this network phase comes in, and that's all sort of well known up to 2010 or so. So that's kind of like the picture we have. And this now, if we are interested in spherical packing phase, and this will be in this tiny region here when the volume fraction is about, say, 20% or so, where you have the smaller block form spheres. Then the spherical phases believed to be more simple cubic phase, and with the very small region where you have the close packed spherical phase, either FCC or hexagonal close packed. So that's the status. And then we thought everything's good, everything's understood, but then there's something new pops up. And this is one experiment from Frank-Kasper, they published in 2010. And what they found is that they just have a die block, copolymer, the simplest one. And they found a scattering pattern looks like this. And that's kind of like you think that doesn't look like anything initially. But then they thought that this could be mistake, could be bad sample, could be non-equilibrium. And they actually neared the sample. This curve is actually when they neared the sample for about a month, and it's still there. So then they thought it was real. So they tried to figure out what it is. Now it turns out that what it is that this is a very complex spherical packing phase formed by this very simple type of copolymer. And it is, of course, the so-called Frank-Kasper sigma phase. And what it is that it is a phase with a unit cell which has 30 spheres in it. And the 30 spheres occupy 5 different positions. The colors here are not different chemical species that chemically they are all the same. It's that they're different equivalent positions. Now the question is why this phase occurs, and that's we sketched our head and try to understand why that's so, and then eventually we came up with one thing, which is that that's actually there's one parameter which haven't been considered, which is what we call this conformational asymmetry, which is that the two blocks has different coolness or different flexibility. So then when we put in this conformational asymmetry into the calculation, and indeed we can see that these Frank-Kasper phases, which is the sigma phase and the A15 phase, actually shows up from the phase diagram. Now with that, actually, then the next development was that experimentally is that correct, and that's where there's a bunch of more experiments that were carried out by Frank Kasper's group, where they synthesized, in this example, they synthesized 3 diblock copolymers, purposely with the different conformational asymmetry. And indeed, what you see is that on the top, when the conformational asymmetry is about 1, the sigma phase, well, it's normal. It's just polycenter cubic and cylinders. But when the conformational asymmetry parameter becomes about 1.3, you have a window for the sigma phase comes up. And when this parameter is about 1.7, this is larger. And this is quite consistent with the new field phase diagram calculated from the self-constant field theory. So that's great. And then we thought about okay, that's good. That's one mechanism, but are there other ways to stabilize the different spherical packing phases? And that's where we investigate quite a few different scenarios. And one particular architecture is this ABN, like 1A, and you have lots of small branches. And that's actually what Greg did long time ago before this, and showed that that's another mechanism to stabilize these phases. So that's one possibility. And another possibility is that you use different block copolymers, you mix them together, and that's a very effective mechanism to regulate these phases. Now, with this, let me just show 2 examples of one of these mechanisms. One is that if you make the other block branch, that's again, as I said, Greg and co-workers anticipated this in 2003. That's actually way before the experimental discovery. And what I mean, theoretically showed that should be the case. And then people actually synthesized these samples with the 2 pieces of 2 independent groups, did that, and they showed indeed that the works, it disappear. So that's one. And the other example is about the block copolymer blends, which is that the idea is that because the formation of these different phases requires you form spheres of different sizes, and you form spheres of, well, quote unquote, spheres of different shapes. And that requires the local segregation of block copolymers. Of course, that's usually against the tendency for the system to distribute uniformly dictated by entropy. Now, one way to regulate this is to think about, you have one block copolymer, you mix another block copolymers in the same chemistry but different volume fraction. And the theoretical calculation showed that if you do that, you can have a very big window, which you can form these complex faces. And this is the ratio of the length of A, the second one to the fourth one, and this is the composition, how much you add in. And you start from BCC, and you can see it opens up a very big window. And this is the complete phase diagram for that. And again, this is a very simple experiment because it doesn't require people to synthesize new polymers. So again, at least two groups have done the experiment, which show they have observed, indeed, you can observe these, and this experimental phase diagram. If you compare that with the theoretical phase diagram with the one slice, qualitatively, the phase transition sequence is quite consistent. Now, the other one, which I think is very, very interesting to me, is that if you make this to extreme, that is to say, you take two AB die block. If you make one A very, very long, and what's going to happen? That is to say, the phase diagram I showed is in this region. Now, this is the ratio of the two polymers. If you make this very long, then what happens is that at some point, the long and short ones don't like to be mixed together. They phase separate themselves. So what you have is you have spheres, large spheres and smaller spheres, and they form a lattice. So that's actually a theoretical prediction from Weaver-Lee's group, not from us, but I think this is a very interesting, which is kind of really thinking about the system simply have different ways to do this. Yeah, very quickly, you can also do very simple mixing. Instead of die block, you just have AP die block, and you mix a little bit of A homopolymer into the core, and that can swell the domain, and you can actually form all these phases as well. And this is actually, this wasn't the theoretically predicted, this was discovered experimentally, and we explained that. Now, with these, there are lots of things going on here. So let me just try to summarize by some things I don't understand, and I'd like to everybody, if you're interested, to have a discussion about this, which is that for the copolymer system, I think we have a good theory, and we start from molecular, and we worked up, and everything looks to be working. But the same phenomenon occurs not only in block copolymers, it's actually everywhere. For example, you have block copolymers, you have these tangible-like molecules, you have very simple surfactant system, you have the design architecture macromolecules. They all form these phases, and the phase transition sequences are all similar. So one question is really, do we have a genetic theory which we can use to describe all these? So that's one challenge. I think there is a possibility, but it requires lots of work. And the other question I think very interesting is related to the kinetics. The idea is that, for example, this is from the basic experiments. You take the same block copolymer. If you just cool it down, you form one phase. And if you freeze it and warm it up, you form another phase. And the idea is that why that's so. Of course, it's the initial condition, but what the initial condition? What are the things encoded in this process? And also, they've done another experiment, which is that the same block copolymer form two phases. And if they warm it up, they become kind of like disordered. But you cool them down, they go back to where they came from. So that they remember something. And again, the question is, what are the things being remembered? So I think those are interesting questions to explore. Now, with this, that's actually what I prepared. And I'm not going to read this, but what I'm going to say is that I've been here for a week. So if anybody's interested in this, I'd be very happy to discuss.
Thank you so much.
talk. So what happens if you alternate these domains A, B, in a long string? The reason I'm asking is at the moment you have interactions between different units, but this would be self-interactions, and that would then be reminiscent of RNA and DNA becoming in that direction. So you could even then ask if you do periodic repeats, or aperiodic repeats. So can I fold a bit like these DNA origamis? Can I get that sort of thing?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very interesting question. First of all, naively, you would think if you have AB, and if the chemical composition are the same, they would form all these phases. They do, but the topology has a very big effect on the phase transition sequence.
Interesting effect in 3D then.
That's right. It will.
I guess I should talk with you later this week again also. If I'd known last week, I would have answered. So you mentioned the Frank-Kasper phases, and of course, if Dennis Ware were still here, we'd be coming on 815. When I first got into business, I'm a minimal surfaces person, the gyros there, but the asymmetry you get lets you account for some Frank-Kasper phases. If my memory serves me, that there's a A15, I think it's C14, and there's some other structure called Z.
Yes. Yes.
And about 30 years ago, John Sullivan and I studied the convex combinations and the rational convex combinations that lead to sort of this mixture. And for the Kelvin problem, the problem of equal volume partitioning with minimum area, surface area. It turned out that A15 was the best of those. We didn't have we had a sort of mathematically heuristic arguments numerically to that. But I'm wondering whether something like that is working in the case of the diblock curve. We never sort of took it back to the diblock curve.
This is a very
is there some optimism?
This is a very, very good question. So the idea here is that again it relates to what is being optimized here.
Exactly.
Now, if you have say soap bubbles and you squeeze them together, then the thing being optimized is the area or the interface energy, and in that's the Kelvin problem, and in that case the A15 is the current
that's where
best one, right?
AB interface.
That's right. That's right. But the problem with these phrases is that these are domains which are deformable, but if you deform them, it costs you some energy. So that's why the solution is not A15 all the time. Sometimes it is, but most of the time is actually the Frank-Kasper sigma phase.
And one last question, maybe. All right. I think everyone that's normally what happened before lunch. Everyone's thinking about that. Thanks so much for you. Thanks.